So once Cortez goes towards Tenochtitlan, he enters the city and he is welcomed by Montezuma, which to many people they seem very kind of not only surprised but kind of puzzled by it. It is argued by different people that Montezuma did believe that he was Quetzalcoatl, as he saw in the readings, and that's always been questioned whether it's true or not. But definitely, we see Montezuma very wary about Cortez. So he enters the city in November of 1519. That's the first time he goes into the city, meets Montezuma, and he actually takes him prisoner because he feels like Montezuma's plotting against Cortez. And Cortez walks into the city with about 400 troops, 400 Spanish troops, and 6,000 native allies. So this battle is not Spanish versus indigenous people, but rather, like we saw in Spain, right, a conglomerate of different groups. The Aztecs did have a massive empire. They did conquer a lot of people, and a lot of people hated them. So it was understandable why Cortez was able to make allies. When Cortez is in Tenochtitlan, he's actually very careful. One of the reading expresses that, right? That he's kind of looking everywhere, looking at the avenues, finding a way out just in case he gets attacked as he's walking through the city. You know, he doesn't go in as a tourist, he goes in as a conqueror. So having that military experience, he's kind of afraid that he's going to be attacked in a place that's not controllable. When Europeans went into battle, if you ever seen like Braveheart, you always see them fighting in a very open field, right? It's just, you know, they're at two different hilltops and then they come down, they rush down, they fight each other in some open field. Well, this was different, right? This is city warfare, and Cortez didn't like that. So that's part of the reason why he took him prisoner. Later on, Montezuma takes Cortez to one of the temples where they have their god, not Tenochtitlan, what's his name? Here's Chipotle. In this temple, right? They have a statue of him, and Cortez actually goes into this temple and takes him off and puts the Virgin Mary and the cross in its place. Now, that was a very kind of scary moment for a lot of people because everybody was surprised that, number one, Montezuma allowed this to happen, and number two, that Cortez has the gall to do this, right? I mean, imagine somebody walking into your church and then just replacing, you know, Jesus Christ with SpongeBob or something. And you're supposed to be okay with that. So people were ready to kill Cortez, but Montezuma kind of held everybody at bay. Now, there's a few days that kind of go by, and then Cortez hears wind of an expedition that came over to arrest him. Remember that Cortez is wanted for treason because he went on this expedition without permission from the crown. So this expedition arrives in Veracruz, and they, when they arrive, they tell the people there why they're there, you know, which is just to grab Cortez, and that you know, once they capture him, they're gonna take off. So Cortez travels down to Veracruz, to the region, and actually fights them because, you know, obviously he's wanted for treason. And he wins. And he wins because the battle is fought on a rainy day, which gives him the upper hand, you know. I think Narvaez actually gets a pike to the eye, and he surrenders, and the battle's over. Now, as Cortez is gone from the city, from Tenochtitlan down in Mexico City, or up in Mexico City, this allows the Aztecs the opportunity to attack, which one finds as it's been called La Noche Triste. I think they changed the name of it because of, you know, kind of the politics that are happening right now. La Noche Triste kind of implies that we're sorry for Cortez, pobrecito. But in kind of with the politics that are happening right now, it's like, no, Cortez kind of deserved it. So as the Aztecs are getting ready to attack, they're actually are killed. They're massacred by the Spanish. So the Aztecs retaliate. When Cortez goes back to the city, he's getting ready to leave the city. They begin to build bridges because the bridges have been destroyed by the Aztecs, so the Spanish cannot leave and their allies cannot leave. Now Cortez is really worried because, again, this is being fought in a city, which means it's going to be guerrilla warfare. And Cortez begins to build bridges and tries to get ready. During this period, Montezuma is killed. Cortez gets ready to leave. They pack up, and they pack up gold. They're not going to leave empty-handed, right? They're there for a particular reason. They're building these bridges. And as they're getting ready to sneak off, there's a native woman who hears what's happening, right? She kind of hears and sees the Spanish leaving, and she warns the warriors, and the Aztecs come out and attack. So what happens is that about 450 Spanish troops end up dying, and then just trying to escape, and then altogether about 860 troops end up fighting and dying altogether. We're talking about native groups and Spanish people. And what happened is that as they were trying to leave the city, the horses, they tried to muffle the horses' hoofs so they wouldn't make noise, but it still made some noise. And the Aztecs destroy the bridges, and then many of them end up drowning. And supposedly some of these troops try to rescue some of the gold. They're sinking and dying into the water, and many of them are trying to save whatever they stole from the city. From the water, and some of them end up dying based on their greed, basically, right? What happens is that Cortez escapes. He's able to make it across, and he goes under a tree. Supposedly, La Malinche just has like a blank stare, kind of surprised by what took place, and Cortez is crying under this tree. Has a moment of sorrow, and he asks for one guy. I can't remember his name, but he asks, "Is this guy still alive?" And they say, "Yes, he is." So he says, "Well, let's go. We have everything we need." And the guy that he was asking for is actually a shipbuilder. So he kind of reassembles, takes a few months off because they need to build ships, and he gets ready for an all-out assault onto the city. Now remember, Tenochtitlan is on a lake, so it's an island on the lake at this time. And as they regroup, they get more troops. Montezuma's dead, so they get a new leader. They get one leader that ends up dying. The reading talks about it, right? He dies of this guy, Kulatlauk. He ends up dying of smallpox. And the last leader is Cuauhtemoc, which is very kind of famous, right? It's a very famous Mexican name. But he's a young boy at this time. He gets captured and is burned. But what Cortez does in this battle is basically starve the city. He gets these boats, he surrounds the city with boats, and cuts them off from any resources. And this is very new to the Aztecs. They've never fought a battle like this. This is a battle that you typically see in Europe when they siege a castle, right? They just kind of surround the castle, and castles in Europe tend to prepare for this. So they just kind of wait it out, try to survive it. And if they do, some of these things last like a year, if not sometimes even longer. So Europeans were accustomed to this. Mesoamericans were not. So he surrounds the city, and they basically just starve them out. People start dying of thirst, of hunger, And by May of 1521, he does a full-on siege. And then as people are dying, not only of starvation, they're actually dying of smallpox, because smallpox, as the previous slide said, right, it's brought over by the expedition. And they, people are just dying left and right. Some of the readings talk about this, right, the stench of bodies and so forth. The boats begin to go use the canals and kind of cut through the city, and just an all-out massacre happens. So on August 13th, 1521 is the official end of this battle, of this war, and the Aztecs kind of fall. Now they don't disappear, the people are still very much still alive, but it all happens, it all accumulates in the time of the fifth sun, right, when the fifth sun was supposed to end. So it's very prophetic, if you will, that this happened around that time period, because something new will take its place. And we see that happening, right? It's a new group of people where, right, the Mexican people are born out of this conquest. So what do we learn? Number one, we see how the Spanish troops see an opportunity in the Americas to recreate themselves. Many of them were just troops that were disinherited in Europe, and now they got a chance to build some new wealth. And they do so not only in places like Mexico, but throughout the Americas. Everything from Brazil to Paraguay to Peru in particular, right? Machu Picchu and all that. So you see a small population controlling, the Americas, and they divided up amongst the Portuguese and the Spanish. We find that the conquest really the ultimate death. So you do have Spanish people they do have superior weapons and maybe techniques, but ultimately it was the diseases that end up devastating the Americas, and that's the real conquest here, and something very relatable, right? We can kind of see that today with, I don't mean to laugh, it's not like funny, haha, but it's just so much correlation between history and contemporary times, where you see something like coronavirus impacting not only people's lives today, where people are dying because of this disease, but also the economic impact that it has. The kind of left us kind of as a stalemate, basically, right? We can't do much. We can't go out. We can't have fun. Blah blah blah. And these people encounter that too with the smallpox outbreaks, killing. I mean, they killed about a third of the population. Corona, that's a much smaller percentage. And lastly, what we see here is the beginning of this concept called mestizaje, right? As I said, the Aztecs believed that the world was going to end, and to some extent, one can argue it did. That the fifth sun did end, and now we're in the sixth sun, right? 2012 was supposed to be the end of the sixth sun, and but in 1519 or 1521, when the conquest is over, we see this new mestizaje, which again represents who we are as Chicanos, because we are the offspring of what happens in this period, right? We are Spanish, we are indigenous, and our culture is very mixed. A little bit of Spanish, a little bit of Afro, a little bit of indigenous, a little bit of Asian too. So we are a mix of all these groups of people, which happened in the 16th century. All right, so we'll stop it there. I think next week you have a film to watch, so very interesting documentary. Stop it there.